Hello, my name's Kim and I'm a herbalist and storyteller. And it's February 2020, and the weather is still bouncing us around with lots of showers and wind and rain pouring down and then bits of sunshine. So not very ideal for being outside. So I thought I'd do a little talk today about one of the plants that's starting to come through. So we can get a look. I'll put some pictures up and I'm going to talk to that. It's going to be Alexander's. But before I go into more detail about Alexander's, I'm going to talk about its bigger family that it's in. It's in the umbellifera family. So that means in common parlance, the carrot and parsley family. And maybe you're familiar, you can hear the word umbrella, umbellifera. So it's these lovely flowers that, these big flower heads. Huge family. I think there's something like 240 plants in this order. And a lot of those are used for culinary and medicinal purposes. So we're thinking of things like, parsley, and then lovage and celery, and then things that have been cultivated on more, as I say, like carrot and parsnip. And then you've got all the cow parsley coming through, that lovely mayflower that we see along the hedgerows. So it's one of those. However, there's a caveat. Because in that family there are some plants that are very poisonous, which is hemlock and water hemlock. So please, my caveat to this is don't go and pick anything unless or go and use anything unless you're very sure of what you're doing. So get a good plant identification book, or go out with someone who knows what they're looking at. Really important. We don't want anyone ending up in A&E, do we? So having said that, there are lots of very interesting safe plants in this, and Alexander's is one of those. And again, I'm going to halt again and say, and because what happens also is people get when they get interested in herbs, they get very, overwhelmed about how to know things, how to use them. And over the years, myself and other herbalists, when people come along and they go, what's that plant? How can I use it? We go, do you know what? We know that goes in one ear and out the other. An important strategy that I encourage is to say, look, if you're wanting to know more about the plants, is when you go out your front door, and it doesn't matter if you're walking along an urban street, there's always things growing, or if you're walking in the park or out in the countryside or the woodland, is see which plant your eye gets drawn to. And then I invite you to really get into a relationship with that plant, in the sense of see what it's doing in the spring. How do the leaves come out? What's its rate of growth? And then as it goes through into summer, how does it flower? When does it flower in relation to the other plants? What insects like it? What happens in the autumn? Does it have, what kind of seeds does it have? Does it fruit? And, in the winter, when does it die back? How does it drop its leaves? So it's a really important process to become part of that journey and embed ourselves in the natural flow, and it just slows things down. So one of the plants that you might have been seeing over the winter, I know in the southern counties, whilst it's been wet, it's been quite mild as well. So this plant has kept growing throughout the whole of that season, and now it's getting slightly lighter. The base plants are growing more. So put a picture up. It's got very green, smooth, glossy leaves, like celery, if you're familiar with celery leaves. And it's a plant that is native to France, and it's said that the Romans brought it over as a food plant, and we know that monastic orders, they had it as a food crop in their gardens as well. And the ordinary folk used it as well, and so it gets used a pot herb, something that we use in our food pots. And also you might come across it as a black pot herb. What's been referred to there is that the seeds were dried and the seeds were black, and that would have been put in stuffs as a spice, a native spice agent. So to say that medicinally it has dropped out of favour being used by medical herbalists in sort of the 1800s, so it doesn't get turned into tinctures like I have got sitting behind me, which is not to say that it can't be used again at some point. But we do know that historically people like Parkinson, writing in the 1600s, and Culpeper, they write about it being used medicinally for treating women's courses, for helping the afterbirth be delivered, for treating kidney stones, and for bringing warmth to the stomach. And I think there's indications it was used in chest infections, so things like consumption. Living in a damp climate, people would have lots of trouble with these kind of conditions. And in folklore, and sometimes people dismiss that notion of folklore, but what we're talking to is a lineage of human knowledge handed down, and often it's very sound knowledge that scientific research then proves, that it was a reality all along of what these plants can do. So I know in Anglesey there's records that sailors would be allowed off board and they could go and collect as much as this plant as they wanted for food stuff, and obviously it would have been a source of vitamin C. And I think in the Isle of Man there's folk records of it being used as a remedy for toothache and for treating stomach conditions in cattle. And so, but how could we use it? Well, if you are ever going to collect anything when you're out and about, for goodness sakes, make sure it's in a place that's clean to be picked from. So there's things like there's not contamination from other animals, or it's not next to a roadside, and also that you do have permission to pick it or collect it. That's very important, to be respectful of that. So you could try a few leaves, and because you don't need much of it, and it's just got quite a nice warming celery type flavour. So you could put a little bit in your mixed salad leaves maybe, or a little bit in a soup near the end to give it a bit of a kick. And you maybe then have a go. You can bank up the stems, because that's how it used to. They used to bank up the stems like celery and sell the stalks. They also used to sell the roots. And the seed as a warming, this warming addition to food. And just in terms of those names, it's called Alexander's now, and we do see it along lots of pathways. It's one of these plants that's managed to hold on in pathways and waysides and coastal paths. It was also called horse parsley. So again, going on about getting to know its Latin name, which I've put up on screen, but also its common local names as well, and then to cross-reference that so that we know that when we're trying to look at a plant and learn about a plant, we're actually looking at the right plant, because even across the globe some plants will have the same common name and they're actually completely different species. So that's always quite interesting to disentangle that one. So I hope you've enjoyed listening. I shall do some more about the plants that are starting to come through. So do like, do subscribe, do share, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks for listening.